So what happens if the discriminant is negative? Well, that means there's no real solutions, and that's what we talked about before. But what I want to talk about is if it is negative, there are no real solutions, but there are these things called complex numbers. Man, you're like, gosh, just when I figured out this, now I need to figure out some more garbage. Well, I'm sorry, but complex numbers, these are these things. These are these things called imaginary numbers. And you're like, why do I need to do that? It's imaginary. I don't know. Some dude came along one day and said, if we square root a negative number, and I put it in my calculator, it doesn't work. But there are these things called complex numbers. And so if I square root a negative number, it's kind of like square rooting 49 here. If I square root 49, I get plus or minus 7. Okay? But since there's a negative number there, that's associated with a negative 1. So I could write this as the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 49. Now this guy is what we're really concerned with. Because see, the square root of negative 1 is I. Okay? The square root of negative 1 is I. So anytime I see the square root of negative 1, I'm referring to it as I. It is an imaginary number. And so the square root of negative 49 would be positive or negative 7i instead of just 7. Why does that matter? You just need to know it. You need to know that there is a different number scale out there. Not just the real numbers, but imaginary as well. So plus or minus 7i. And if I said the square root of negative 100, that's no real numbers, but it does have solutions at plus or minus 10i, right? Because the square root of 100 is 10. Or the square root of negative 64. Well, that's plus or minus 8i. So what you need to know is that there exists a complex number system there. And what you need to understand is that when I do the quadratic formula, if the discriminant, the stuff underneath the root, is negative, then I'm going to have a complex number at the end. Okay? And so that's what we kind of need to look at next.